Well, thank you everyone who is joining this call for a really interesting and very important topic that we think is relevant to our Central Valley immigrant and overall communities here in this region of California. As you know, we now live in an era where information and information technologies are extremely important. We have an informational-based economy as well. And the state of California and other organizations, and as well as the federal government and state governments, have been paying attention to this digital trends. The state of California in particular has been developing programs to ensure that all residents in the state of California have access to broadband, and in addition to the technological access, to also learn how to use broadband for all areas of everyday life, from education to work and other matters as well. So we're very happy to have two key presenters today. One of them, we'll begin with him, is Scott Adams, Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy in the California Department of Technology. We'll also have as a keynote speaker, Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, Senior Fellow with the Building Skills Coalition. And the agenda for this meeting today is very simple. Just this brief welcome and introductions to our two key speakers. During the presentation by Scott Adams, he'll be joined by other members of his team, and there will be an opportunity for some Q&A during that section. But also after Amanda's presentation, we'll have a general Q&A section as well, followed by the conclusion. So I'm very happy that you have all been able to join us today. The Central Valley Immigrant Integration Collaborative really appreciates the willingness of all these partner organizations to join in this event that is designed to help our Central Valley communities. So without further ado, thank you very much to Scott Adams, the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy from the California Department of Technology. Scott, thank you for joining us, for making time to meet with these Central Valley organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. We appreciate the opportunity to be here and come into the space and present to the Central Valley Immigration Collaborative on the work that the state is doing to close the digital divide. And we really appreciate that this is such a a big issue, that it takes partnerships and collaboration at all levels of government and with regional and local partners. And so we're just thrilled to be here and honored to speak with you. Members of my team are here to join in the presentation. We wanted to not just have it be a presentation, but a back and forth, and have there be some bi-directional conversation. So I'll briefly talk through the state's approach to broadband for all and the state digital equity planning process. Anna Lacona is here and is gonna has some key questions she wanted to engage with you all on. Rich Navas is going to issue a call to action on some of the data gathering activities we're doing, and then Wen from our team is going to provide some information about some opportunities to really partner with the state and bring your expertise and local knowledge to the table, to have your voices be heard for your community, to help shape the digital equity plan and how future digital equity capacity dollars are spent to empower digital equity in your communities. So Anna, can we bring up the slides, please? So if we could skip to the next slide, please. Great. As Mr. Martinez said, I'm Scott Adams. I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy within the California Department of Technology, and our office coordinates the state's Broadband for All program and its various initiatives at the state level aim to achieving broadband for all across the state. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Martinez said, in today's technology-driven society, really the access to broadband and home internet is the difference between being able to fully engage in life and being cut off. And so the state's Broadband for All program is really focused on three main components, and that's or digital equity barriers and overcoming those. And that's access to reliable and robust internet service all throughout the state, at home, schools, businesses, and libraries. The affordability piece, making sure that residents have access to affordable internet services and devices to leverage the internet, that we work collaboratively with partners to increase adoption of both internet and computing devices. And then knowing that digital literacy and inclusion these are all critical components of digital equity. And I'd just like to point out that the state is already investing billions of dollars on that access side, $3.5 billion to develop a statewide open access middle mile network, and another $2.75 billion to provide last mile grant programs to internet service providers, local governments, and other eligible entities to develop last mile solutions. Next slide, please. What we really wanted to highlight here is, despite the significant investments in broadband for all, there's still a gap, and the size of our state and our population necessitate that we go after all available federal funds to achieve the aims of broadband for all. So what we wanted to underscore is that over the next several months, the state is leveraging Digital Equity Act dollars and Broadband Equity Access and Deployment dollars to develop plans that, when completed, will bring back millions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars to the state. And to kind of explain the roles and responsibilities, the Department of Technology has been designated as the administering entity for the Digital Equity Planning Grant Program, both by the governor and the legislature. An important part of this is the Public Utilities Commission is the administering entity for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is going to bring a significant pool of funding back to the state. Both of these planning processes are going to be coordinated. We are required, both by law, but also by our own values and direction from the administration, to have extensive engagement with statewide and local entities to get bi-directional feedback and input on the development of these plans. And that when both are completed, as I said, they will unlock hundreds of millions of additional dollars to achieve broadband for all. Next slide, please. What is really important to note about the Digital Equity planning process is that the Digital Equity Act basically directs states to prioritize investments for 8 covered populations. And these are folks that have been historically, on the wrong side of the digital divide as a result of, a number of issues in terms of broadband deployment and challenges around broadband adoption. And so wanted to make sure that we call out that all of the work that we are doing is going to be viewed through the lens of these 8 covered populations. And we seek, really partnership with you all who represent these 8 covered populations and members of the 8 covered populations themselves. So to just clearly outline these, the first covered population are individuals living in covered households or with income at or below 150% of the federal poverty level, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers that include English language learners and those with low levels of literacy, members of racial or ethnic minority groups, and folks who live in rural areas. Next slide. Now, the way that we've designed the planning process, again, given the size of the state's geography and the population, we wanted to create a process that had multiple opportunities for engagement. So we have developed a statewide planning group that consists of 22 state agencies that represent the covered populations or specific policy areas that we're hoping to increase outcomes in once we close the state's digital divide. Those are virtual convenings that are held on a quarterly basis. Additionally, the Digital Equity Act asks states to develop digital equity plans that tie to other state policy priorities. So we've established outcome area working groups to bring together subject matter experts and local leaders and groups to provide both their intimate local knowledge about specific digital equity barriers, but to share strategies and solutions that might be working in communities, and also identify gaps that to which we can potentially direct digital equity capacity dollars. We have a number of digital equity surveys that we will be promoting that you'll hear about later to seek both information from organizations and individuals to help make decisions about the formation of the digital equity plan and how those digital equity dollars are spent. We will host 20 regional and local outreach events throughout the state to actually leave the confines of this Zoom ecosystem we find ourselves in and get out of Sacramento, and to really learn from you all in your communities about how we all can partner together to close the digital divide. And lastly, there's a number of opportunities for statewide public engagement through the California Broadband for All portal and a number of other communications and ad hoc meetings. Next slide, please. Really wanted to underscore that the outcome area working groups that we've developed for digital equity are education, health, digital literacy and inclusion, essential services, accessibility and civic engagement, workforce and economic development, and tribal collaboration. And all of these groups have very specific tasks to, develop a stakeholder map, to conduct an asset inventory, to promote our surveying data gathering tools, and then do a gap analysis and provide recommendations to the Department of Technology on what should be included in the digital equity plan. We'd like to note that all of the various components of the digital equity plan are open to the public. They are open to all partners, and we encourage your attendance or participation wherever your time and capacity will allow you to partner with us. Next slide. Briefly, just wanted to show you, this is a fairly compressed deadline or timeline of what we are doing. We have engaged in a fairly significant stakeholder mapping effort between November and January. That's always ongoing. Between February and April, we'll be launching our surveys and our ecosystem mapping tools. May and June will largely be for data and gap analysis. July, we'll develop a draft plan, open that up to public comment. And then September, October, November, we'll be refining the plan and submitting it to the NTIA. You'll see at the bottom, there's some key dates identified where some of the engagements we'll be having are, but this just gives you a picture of how compressed the timeline is and how much we have to accomplish, and hopefully with your partnership and participation along the way. So with that, I thank you. That is my opening presentation. I want to hand it over to Anna for the next portion.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. Like Scott mentioned, my name is Anna, and I'm part of our OBDL team here in pushing forward our digital equity work. And for this section, we really wanted to open it up to hear from you all and use our Q&A function here in the chat and really hear from you as to what you think some of the barriers are to achieving digital equity. And so with that, I'll ask a series of questions. I want to ask 3 questions from you and hear from you all. And our first question is here. Oh, sorry. So what barriers prevent access to key services or community engagement opportunities in your community? And I think Anne from my team is also helping me from looking at the Q&A and chat here. So feel free to start typing away, and then I'll just read all 3 of them. That way we can engage with all 3 of them here in the chat. The second question that we would love to hear from you is, how can we work towards ensuring everyone in the Central Valley has access to a digital device and internet connectivity? And then our third question is, what programs have been successful in working towards this goal?
Hey,
And
Anna,
yes, go ahead.
Anna, someone had mentioned that chat is disabled, but I do see that folks are putting stuff in the Q&A. So potentially, if that could be where some of the information is shared. For instance, the Fresno County Coalition of Digital Inclusion has a report from the youth surveys on their needs and what they experienced during the pandemic. And the question was asked, would this be of use? And if so, who should it be sent to? I think that's an excellent question. It would be totally helpful, and we'll provide in a chat an answer of, we absolutely, that's the kind of information that we're hoping to learn from and gather.
Sorry, chat should be enabled now. I apologize. I didn't know that we had it disabled.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. If folks can try out the chat function and start typing in some of your thoughts, responses, or even questions for us in the chat, that would be great. And I do see some responses coming in. Daniela is expressing one barrier can be that they don't have training in their own language, which is very important to flag. Thank you, Daniela. We have other barriers listed as transportation, language access. Another comment of timing of the events. Again, language barriers and transportation. Someone is listing computer literacy and familiarity. Another note about language barriers and proximity to vital resources and lack of resource awareness.
Yeah, these are, thank you so much. The consistent, some of the consistent themes about language access. It's very clear to us that, you know, in order to effectively close the digital divide, that we have to be mindful of working with trusted partners, meeting with, you know, folks, partnering with folks in the community, and making sure that our, you know, all of the materials that are used are translated in languages with cultural competency to really, you know, be applicable to the individual residents. Wanted to point out one thing about the digital equity planning process is that where possible, we are going to be translating our digital equity planning materials into up to 13 different languages to make sure that individual residents and community organizations have access, and that it's not just about putting information out there, but putting information that's accessible to others. Really, thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and we keep receiving more comments in the chat and Q&A. So thank you all for participating in this portion of the Q&A. And we're taking in your comments and we're taking in your notes as we move forward with our stakeholder engagement process and ways to get involved, which you'll hear from very soon. We are taking in your comments. Great. So feel free throughout this presentation to keep using the chat so that we can continue to take notes, but I will pass it on to our next speaker on how to get involved.
Thank you, Anna.
Yep. Go ahead, Richmond.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rich Navas. I just wanted to let you know, based on all of the great feedback that you provided, there is a way for you to get involved and be front and center in this process. You heard Scott Adams, Deputy Director Adams, talk about the state digital equity planning process and how we have multiple components of this process. And one of the ways to get involved is to participate in meetings that we post on the Broadband for All portal. Please sign up for updates on the Broadband for All portal. The link is here, as you can see. By signing up, we'll be able to keep you informed about events that are coming up where you can actually participate and make your voice heard. The other way to participate, if you are an organization or an entity or an agency that provides services to the public to leverage any form of technology to promote a service, so you offer digital skills training, you help people get access to devices, we want to know about this. Please share this information with us. We have a tool called the Digital Equity Ecosystem Mapping Tool. We affectionately call it the DEAM tool. This tool is going to be rolled out by this evening. It is going to go live, and we are going to push this out to all organizations and entities to help complete this tool to tell us what's going on in the field. What are you doing for programs and services for communities in need to help them get connected, to get them the skills training that they need to be digitally literate with using computer devices, using the internet, and also getting access to publicly accessible tools, learning about cybersecurity. All of these things matter. If you're a part of it, please share it with us. So that tool called the DEAM tool will go out today, and we will actually be socializing this tool through social media, through email, and we'll be posting it online as well on the Broadband for All portal. So please be a part of this very important process to get engaged in letting the state know what you're doing for communities. This tool, the DEAM tool, will also be available in Spanish. So the DEAM tool is in both English and Spanish for organizations to push out to their partner entities that they deal with. So if you are an organization and you work with faith-based groups, push this out to your partner channels as well. The other tool that we're actually going to be sharing with the public is called the Public Survey, the Digital Equity Public Survey. You heard Scott say that we're going to present this survey in 14 languages. We are taking inclusivity very seriously. This tool is actually set up to be completely accessible, and it's also set up with audio functionality so that people can actually click on the audio functions within the public survey so that they can hear the questions being asked in the intonation of the language that they're familiar with. So that's very important to us, to get as many communities engaged in this process, to tell us what's going on in the household. The public survey is meant to give us some insight into what California households are experiencing in terms of barriers to digital equity. What are they experiencing in terms of barriers to broadband accessibility, affordability, and adoption? We would like to know what these barriers are and basically what each family or each individual must be experiencing in terms of their inability to access these services. I see that you've posted some amazing information in the chat to let us know some of the barriers that we're seeing, but I think getting this public survey out there and getting households to participate gives us some really detailed insight. And just so you're aware, there is a speed test embedded in the public survey so that we can actually get some very granular information of what households are experiencing in terms of speed where they are living. We would also encourage you to participate in virtual and in-person events. My colleague Anne Nguyen is going to actually share some of that information with you and let you know some of the upcoming events that are happening. We have a whole series of events happening this week. Highly encourage you to be a participant in these events and make your voice heard. So thank you, everyone. We look forward to working very closely with you.
Thank you, Rachna, and hi everyone. My name is Anne Nguyen. I am a resident of San Joaquin County, living here in Tracy. So really excited to be able to be part of this meeting and speaking with you all. Next slide, Anna. And as Richna mentioned, we're hosting virtual and in-person events. So I'll just start with the virtual ones. We planned a total of 24 virtual events. The February ones just happened, but the ones in March, May, and June are coming up. You will get these slides, or you can follow our Broadband for All events. I just posted it in our chat if you would like to register for our March ones. The registration links are up, and we update them on a monthly basis as the next meetings are happening. So please sign up and be part of the conversation, be part of the working group, working towards outcomes in education, health, digital literacy and inclusion, workforce and economic development, essential services, accessibility and civic engagement, and last but not least, tribal collaboration. So each one of those working group help answer these questions in orange, which is our focus question for each monthly meetings in these topics on the left. So if the time works for you, a virtual space would allow you to join us from anywhere in California. We would love to have you at the table. However, we know that sometimes timings don't work, or that virtually does not work well for you. We want to provide an opportunity to engage and be engaged with you as well in our in-person events. So the two, next slide, Anna. Thank you. got ahead of myself there. The two in San Joaquin that are coming up is Friday, April 14th at Merced Community College, and at Fresno City College on Saturday, April 15th in the morning. So we will update our website of the exact time, registration links, and of course, ways to sign up shortly. So these engagement sessions are coming up. So we know that you would be probably really excited to bring your organization and your friends, networks to these events. So we'll make sure to have them up on our website shortly, but want you to know these dates and estimated time and location first for you to get started. But with that, I think handing the slide over to Scott to close us.
Well, yeah, thank you, Anne, and thank you, team, and thank you, Dr. Martinez, for having us here. We have a number of different emails that you can contact us at. The general digital equity at state.ca.gov email, and then mine and Richna and Anna's email. And we look forward to hearing from you and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott, and the rest of the team. I'd like to now invite Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, Senior Fellow, Building Skills Coalition, to join us for the presentation. And those of you who may remember, thanks to Amanda, last year we had the very first webinar dealing with the Digital Equity Act. So Amanda very graciously agreed to do another presentation for us today, and we're very pleased and happy that you're able to do it, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. As some of you may know, I come to this work having done work at a community-based organization in Philadelphia for many years, serving immigrant workers. And so it is really always a pleasure to come back into immigrant advocacy work. So I have a handful of resources I'm going to be sharing with you today from a recent study that we did. But the take-home message that I hope you take from everything I'm sharing with you is that the expertise and the wisdom that your organizations already have about the experience that your community members have, about their levels of expertise, about their needs and their aspirations and their dreams for themselves and their families are the most powerful tool we have for building digital equity. When we ask people why they've enrolled in a digital skills class or why they're going to their local public library for help using a computer or a smartphone, over and over again, people say things like, I want to get a better job. I want to get a job at all. I want to help my children with schoolwork. I want to be able to access healthcare services that aren't available in my community, perhaps using telehealth, right? So people already have their dreams and aspirations for what they want to accomplish. And part of the public policy advocacy that we all work on is to make sure that the tax money that they pay in their taxes comes back to their communities to support them in accomplishing those dreams and aspirations. So that's kind of the big picture sort of holder for this conversation. I'm going to share some information about new research that my organization has just done. If you're the kind of person who likes to geek out on data, good news, I've got some data in this presentation, and we've got more in our full report. And if you're the kind of person who's less interested in the numbers and more interested in the people, I also have some people stories. So we'll get a bit of everything in today's conversation. So we've just been touching on this in all of the comments that you all shared in the chat during the presentation from our colleagues at the California Department of Technology. We know that people need all three components of digital equity. They need broadband internet access, high-speed internet access. They need hardware, a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet, other devices, and they need the skills to be able to use them effectively. Some of you may know the work of Dr. Amy Gonzalez here in California. She's done some amazing work working with first-generation, primarily Latino college students on the issue of technology maintenance. It's a fancy term for basically if you're a college student and you can only afford an old, slow computer, you're going to face more stress and more impact on your grades than if you're able to have a fast, up-to-date computer. And that holds true for people who aren't college students as well. And I'm sure you all have examples from your work of families where perhaps everyone shares one smartphone, or people are still using pay per prepaid cell phone plans, or other kinds of very limited devices that maybe can't do everything that they'd like to be able to accomplish. And because people say over and over again, I want to learn more digital skills so I can get a job or get a better job, we said, let's look at some help wanted ads from employers and see what they're really looking for in terms of digital skills. So we looked at 43 million ads from 2021. And I've got some background on our research project on this slide here, which again, if you're the kind that person likes to dig deeper, you can go deeper. But this is the take-home message. Across all those millions of job ads, 92% of them required definitely or likely digital skills. So definitely digital skills are pretty straightforward. Things like Excel. Likely digital skills are things like bookkeeping, where you could do it using pen and paper, but many people these days do it using a software program. And when we did some of the qualitative interviews to accompany this study, one thing we heard over and over again was the cost of not having digital skills, right? I heard a really heartbreaking story just this week from someone who told me about a hospice worker, a frontline healthcare worker whose limited digital skills meant that they didn't record a service given to a patient in an accurate way on the digital chart. And it kicked off 3 days of medical errors and problems for that patient, right? So the consequences can be really serious. And we see that in California, there's actually a slightly higher demand than the national average in terms of jobs requiring definitely digital skills. So let's talk about what some of those look like, right? In some cases, as different parts of the agricultural sector mechanize and automate, we're seeing things like tractors or combine harvesters that have onboard technology that monitors things like irrigation or fertilizer, and folks have to be able to troubleshoot those in the field, usually with no broadband access. Working in greenhouses, maybe being accustomed to using electronic sensor technology. Working in grain silos, using sensors that can monitor the moisture and the gases escaping from grain to make sure that it doesn't get too damp and become moldy, doesn't get too dry and become too lightweight when it's being moved for sale. We see it also in industries like food service, where restaurant workers are increasingly using handheld and other devices. Warehouse and logistics workers, I know a big sector in some parts of the region in terms of the order picking and inventory management software. Of course, we mentioned telehealth before. Oftentimes non-clinical staff, so people who might have been working as a receptionist or something like that, are now having to help patients and doctors alike figure out, how do I log into the telehealth portal? What does it mean if it's not working? How do I troubleshoot it? And that's a skill that they didn't need to have just a couple of years ago, but is now becoming increasingly common. Food processing. We think of poultry processing as cold and messy and difficult work. It is. This is actually a real life picture. This is not a stock picture. This is from a plant in the South this is a worker named Manuela and another worker named Marisol, who are using an HMI, a human machine interface, to control the robot that is lifting the 40-pound boxes of frozen meat and stacking them on pallets, right? And so when they were hired for this job, it didn't require a high school diploma. It really doesn't require anything except for a strong back and an ability to lift those boxes. But when the company bought the robot, then they suddenly had to transition from a job that required lifting boxes to a job that requires being able to interact with computers. And they've risen to the occasion phenomenally. Marisol is 62 years old and is the expert at repairing the robot when it breaks down or doesn't function well. And of course, construction, another industry where we've seen a huge growth in the demand for mobile apps for construction workers. So when we looked at those millions of job ads, we saw that even when jobs require very little experience, employers are overwhelmingly requiring digital skills. And even when jobs require a high school diploma, employers are overwhelmingly requiring digital skills. And this is true for people of all ages, right? We often say, oh, younger people are digital natives, they're comfortable with everything. But the reality is that, like people of all ages, immigrants and English learners need opportunities to build from the skills they have to the skills they need. So maybe they're really comfortable using WhatsApp or using a mobile money app to wire money home for remittances, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're comfortable navigating a payroll app if they have to submit their hours via app now to get paid, right? And so folks need opportunities to build from the skills they're already comfortable with into the new skills that they need. And of course, we do see that on average, and this is national data, when you move from a job that requires no digital skills to a job that requires even one digital skill, on average, wages go up. So this is median hourly wages going up over time, as you're moving rather from one job to another. And of course, as folks are earning more money, they're contributing more in terms of tax revenue, and they're often spending more locally in consumption and sort of local economic activity. So as immigrant advocates, as we think about helping people build digital skills using some of those federal resources that Scott and his team are helping to bring to California through the Digital Equity Act and the BEAD funding, when we think about your organizations, we know that trusted community-based organizations, whether they are nonprofits, labor unions, worker advocacy organizations, whether they are public libraries, adult education programs, adult schools, community colleges, they are the first line for people to go to ask for support in building their skills. And those organizations need to be well-resourced with federal funding to help people build these kinds of digital skills. And in particular, when we think about foundational skills, we're thinking about things like, can you download and install a new app on your phone? If a website requires you to use two-factor authentication, do you feel comfortable navigating that? And then there are industry-specific skills, and I've put a couple of them specifically from California on this slide here. So when we think about this data that I've just shared with you about how digital skills are changing in real life, and where people need opportunities to build them, we can think about the new federal funding that's coming to California and how to make sure that it actually pays off. And the first and the the most simple is to just advocate as part of that public engagement process that Scott and his team were just outlining, to make sure that the Digital Equity Act funding that is spent in the Central Valley really does respond to helping people increase their access to digital skill building opportunities. And we know that there are a handful of opportunities for people to build skills in languages other than English, but we also know there's a lot of gaps right now. A lot of our digital skills tests and assessments are only available in English. And that's a huge missed opportunity, because we know that just because your English skills aren't strong doesn't mean that you're not comfortable with technology. And so we need to make sure that there are ways to develop assessments to understand people's digital skills, even if they don't yet have strong English skills. We also know that the federal government has already said that you can use digital equity funding for basic, applied, and advanced digital skills training. And we know that all three types of training are needed. Congress did not put an immigration status restriction on these funds. Let me be very clear about that. There is no federal rule that would rule out undocumented people from participating in digital equity classes and programs. My organization has been advocating to make sure that the federal government releases clear guidance affirming that states are not supposed to add extra requirements on top of the federal rule. But Congress was very clear. There is no immigration status restriction with this funding. So if your organization is serving people who are in mixed status families, or people who are undocumented or in transitional status, TPS status, you should be able to serve them. And the data that I just shared with you about employer demand for services can be combined with census data. I know many of you worked really hard during Census 2020 to make sure that not only Spanish-speaking communities, but folks who speak indigenous languages and others were accurately captured in the census, or to combat undercounts that happened in the census. So taking that on the ground local information that you have and combining it with this national data on skills can really help. Going back to that list of covered populations that Scott and his team were going over, right? We know that English language learners are a covered population under the law. We know that people of color and low-income folks are covered populations. So making sure that we take advantage of the data that you all have to reach those communities is incredibly important. So that's the end of the data that I have to walk you through. And I hope that that information is useful to you. You are warmly welcome to use our charts and graphs in your own presentations and events. Just credit National Skills Coalition and you can go right ahead and use them. We have about 15 minutes left now for additional conversation and questions. And so I'm going to turn things back to Dr. Martinez and just invite folks to submit questions either in the chat or via the Q&A box. If you have additional questions, either about my presentation or going back to the digital equity planning process that our colleagues at the California Department of Technology were walking you through. Thanks so much for your time and your attention.
Amanda, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll open it up for questions from our colleagues. So please raise your hand or add your comment. Well, we have one already from Vicky Solis. Vicky, would you like to, what are some specific ways an agency can support this work?
I'm going to defer to Scott and his team first because they have a whole engagement process. But let me defer.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's multiple ways that an agency can support and partner on this work. And, you know, particularly, it depends on what type of agency and what their primary function is. If it's a local local planning agency, then definitely working with the Middle Mile team and the Public Utilities Commission, and analyzing what last mile grant programs are available, you know, to connect back to the middle mile. I think if it's a local a county health office or an office of Veterans Affairs, a local education department or health department, looking at ways to, there was an earlier question about how to identify, resources and low-cost offers. Like, how can agencies leverage their, existing networks and communication structures to promote awareness of the Affordable Connectivity Program and affordable offers. Additionally, I think using those same networks and structures and communications vehicles to promote out the existence and the need for organizations to put themselves on the digital equity ecosystem map, and filling out that form, reaching out to individual residents and encouraging them to let their voice be heard and answer the online survey. So that's a short answer in many ways.
Vicky, would you like to add anything else? You can unmute.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you for having this wonderful series or conversation today. So Scott, sorry, that last piece you mentioned right now. So really getting the surveys out to the community is a way that we can support what is happening. And so I work for Head Start. All of our Head Start families are low-income families. Also, I'm out in Merced County, and we have a lot of communities here that, well, we're all rural, really. I live in one of the Delhi, and I just ran the map, and there is nothing there. So really getting those surveys, and what, I haven't seen the survey myself. So what are you intending to get from the survey? Like, how do you plan to proceed or to get started?
Well, thank you. And let me defer to Richna about the timing of the survey, and acknowledge that there's we're doing a statewide phone survey, an online survey that'll be optimized for mobile phones. And Richna can talk to you about some of the language and accessibility needs we're doing. And then do also want to acknowledge that someone had requested paper versions of the survey, so Richna can speak to those as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So we actually want to find out, for instance, what the barriers are. So if you're indicating that you're working with your constituent groups and they're telling you affordability is a big issue, or I don't understand what the options are that are available to me, or I need the skills training to even know how to leverage the internet to be able to get me this information. All of that's going to be captured through the public survey. That's the purpose of getting a survey to the households, to be able to gather that kind of information at a very granular level. And what we are asking, there are digital navigators that are available to help various households if they don't have online access, right? So if they don't have any means of doing this, it would be great if they can go to organizations to get help completing the survey and participating in it through a digital navigator to let the state know some of the barriers that they may be experiencing. The other thing about the paper survey, we are actually going to make a condensed version of the survey available in multiple languages so that people can fill it out very easily at these regional events, and we can try and push this out to partner channels, partner organizations, different community groups, different coalitions, to be able to say, share this with folks, help people participate, help them actually fill out this survey and share this information back with the state, so that we can actually collect data from all of you, from communities that may not have any online access. We want to make sure that people are heard, their voices are heard, and we understand that not everyone has access to a computer or internet access. So this is one of the reasons why we're pushing this public survey out, and we're going to do it through the regional events as well. So I hope that answers your question, Vicky. Did you have any other questions about that survey that I may not have answered?
No, thank you so much. I want to give others an opportunity to ask their questions if they have any. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, Rich, one question or one thing I would just like to add is that could we drop the languages that the survey is going to be translated in? And we do know that the survey is accessible by mobile phone as well, that are fairly ubiquitous. I've tried it myself. It's pretty cool. But in addition to the language translation for folks with low literacy levels or other accessibility needs, there will be audio questions there. So that's another feature we're building into it. And I think the question was, when are we going to have that ready to launch? We're fingers crossed aiming for sometime around April 1st.
One question that I have for both, and then we can go to the other colleagues. What does the funding timeline look like at the federal and state level? When will the state of California be able to provide some funding to organizations interested in supporting these efforts? And Amanda, if you can also let us know about the federal funding situation. Thank you.
So I'll defer to Scott on the state stuff first, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question, because we get that a lot. So the the first round of funding right now is we're leveraging a planning grant that the National Telecommunications and Information Administration made available to all states to actually go out and develop plans that require extensive engagement, from state and local community groups and individual residents. The way that the timeline works is that we have to put that plan together in collaboration with all of you by November. And then once that plan is completed, we turn it into the NTIA. The NTIA has to give its stamp of approval. And then they will have a notice of funding opportunity. It's kind of part of the federal process. And then the state can apply for our allocation of digital equity capacity grants to help implement the plan. So we're uncertain when that's going to happen, but I don't think capacity grants will be available probably until early 2024. And there'll be another bucket of competitive grants that will be available for entities that kind of bypass the state and apply directly to the NTIA for those. And again, we aren't quite aware of that timeline on those. It's probably not going to precede, and it will likely follow the capacity grants sometime end of this year, beginning of next. And as we get more information, we'll share it with you all.
Yeah, and I will just add briefly, and I put this in the chat as well. The federal process and the state process are to some degree independent of each other, in the sense that if you are a nonprofit organization, you could potentially apply both to the state for funding and to the federal government directly for funding. But as Scott said, the federal competitive discretionary grants won't be out until at least early 2024, because the way Congress wrote the law, the state funding has to come out first, and then the competitive grants applications happen after that. There's a list, and it's a publicly available list, it's not a secret, of the kinds of organizations that are eligible to apply for this federal funding. They include community colleges, local government entities, nonprofits, not K-12 schools, but really probably anybody else who's on this call. I looked at the list of organizations, would qualify under some of that umbrella. And if you want to sign up for notification about the federal piece, so Scott and his team have already shared their URL for their state piece, but the federal website is internetforall.gov, and you can sign up for their email announcements, and you'll get the national level announcements there. That's not the California specific ones, it's just the national ones.
Thank you very much, both of you. Other questions, please raise your hand. We have Ricardo Suarez, who had raised his hand quite a while ago. Ricardo, go ahead and mute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ricardo Suarez. I'm the new member of the team, and I'm really glad to be here with you. And just feel free to I'm your total disposal. So if you need anything, you can count on me.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to working with you.
If there isn't another question, this is Vicky again. So those events, I know there's one in Merced and one in Fresno. What do those events look like? Who is being invited? What can we do to support you?
Oh, excellent question. So those are big tent events. We're working with a partner entity that we've procured. The California Emerging Technology Fund is working with the Department of Technology and the PUC to organize these in partnership with the local or the regional broadband consortia and various government entities. And the way that we're looking at this is that we're required to engage with a lot of different partners and stakeholders. So local government and tribal leaders, economic developers, community planners, nonprofit organizations, schools, libraries, county health, veterans offices, internet service providers, etc. And really any individual resident. So anyone who's got a vested interest in closing the digital divide and has ideas on specific community needs is going to be welcome to these events. And Vicky, we're developing the agendas now, but I think what you could expect is, part of an information session about making sure that local community partners and stakeholders have an understanding of the current investments that are already out there and how they can support local efforts. And then we will have some, probably 2/3 of what look to be about 3-hour events will be, engagement sessions where there's a lot of community sharing and residential lived experiences that can really help inform some of the statutory requirements that both the Department of Technology needs to fulfill to the NTIA on the digital equity side, and then similarly for the Public Utilities Commission on the BEAD side. What we're also working with local partners on is creating individual sessions for on the access side. If there are planners who want to engage with our Middle Mile Broadband Initiative team or the Public Utilities Commission on how to connect last mile, broadband projects to the middle mile and leverage that, that would be one thing. We're also, working with the local organizing partners to figure out if we can do affordable connectivity program, train the trainer programs, or even on-site enrollment events. So, let me ask you a question. What might be useful from a community perspective to have included in these events?
I think there's a lot of content that is already being covered, and I think a lot that will be gained with the surveys really is having a clear understanding. I think sometimes when these events occur, when the information goes out, is, especially for something as detailed as this, is just putting it out there with a question. Come share what's not working with you. Come share how internet can be improved in your community. And that way it would engage the community and say, well, I have something to say about, I'd like to be there and voice my opinion, as opposed to where I'm at now. It's like, okay, what are we doing, right? What can I expect from going? And you might get people that attend that are having their own personal lived experience myself included. You know, I'm a manager for Head Start. You would think I have wonderful internet at home, but this pandemic was a nightmare for me because I live in a small community with no good internet, and a task that took me 45 minutes at work was taking me 3 hours at home. My son, so that was worse. So it's different incomes, you know, some like so the language barrier. All we've been able to do here at Head Start when we dove into the pandemic, I kind of saw it I saw it coming. So we started to help families understand how to even create an email account, right? Something as we think as basic as that, but some still don't know how to turn on a computer. They're afraid of the computer. So getting the public to understand the types of questions or types of feedback you're looking for at an event like this might engage them in a way that they would want to come and share with you.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. And now that I hear you, the one thing that our team and the various folks on our broader team are putting together both, you know, invitation language. We should have a fairly defined agenda pretty soon, and a fact sheet that's translated in the applicable languages for each area that will be double-sided. And so one side will, you know, kind of outline broadband for all, and then the other side about the session will frame those questions, like what are the digital equity barriers for your community? What is working well? What are effective strategies that are there? What can the community do more of? And what are the gaps? And how could digital equity and BEAD funding be utilized to support those efforts?
Thank you both. A comment by Jose Martinez. Go ahead, Jose.
Good afternoon, Scott and team. I wanted to ask kind of a follow-up to just the dialogue that's been taking place here towards the end, which is, you know, what resources might be made available to organizations that might be in a position to be able to potentially, you know, help engage the communities that we work with in completing those surveys. Certainly collateral materials that are, you know, with the appropriate messaging to engage people and encourage them to do that would be helpful. But because not any of the organizations, I don't think any of us have it as our primary function to do outreach. You know, there is always the question, you know, is there any financial support to be able to go ahead and help with that in the event that, you know, again, if we're going to travel to neighboring communities, I work in a 2-county region, and so at minimum, there's mileage that I need. I'd have to go ahead and cover for the staff that work with me to go ahead and do that. If we're tying into another event in one of those communities, sometimes there's fees that we need to go ahead and pay to, you know, to have them set up a table for us or something like that. So again, didn't want to miss the opportunity to ask the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're really looking at a lot of different things to make these events as accommodating as possible, from what kind of language translation needs to be there, whether or not we can provide childcare or if that's needed, because we know that's a consideration, and looking at other ways we can support communities. So I would just say that we're looking at all options. We're trying to utilize the you know, the planning grant that we have, which is you know, needs to cover the whole state. So I would suggest contacting our office about, you know, specific needs, and we'll have to loop back on that.
And since I'm not a state government official, I can say a couple of other things that maybe other folks aren't free to say. So Congress only gave states a very small amount of money for this first planning year. So Scott's office doesn't have a huge amount of money just to cover the planning process. But there are other pieces of the puzzle that are happening. So some of your colleagues in other parts of the state, for example, in Long Beach, used a chunk of their CARES Act and American Rescue Plan Act money to support some digital inclusion and outreach efforts. So, and Rebecca Kauma, who's the Digital Equity Director in Long Beach, has done a phenomenal amount of work on multilingual outreach in Long Beach. So she might be a good person to talk to in terms of thinking creatively about talking to your county officials about local money, whether it's local leftover American Rescue Plan dollars that might not have been fully allocated, or community services block grant money, community development block grant money, or other funding that can help support this work. Rebecca might be an interesting person to talk to. And then another person to talk to is Eric Nisheim in at Literacy Minnesota. They did a really interesting partnership with their local workforce board in St. Paul, Minnesota, to support this program called Tech Packs to get digital navigation and outreach services out to immigrant and refugee families in St. Paul. And so he might be a good person to talk to about potentially approaching your local workforce board to get some money to support this work. And then, of course, there are private foundations, and you all know better than I do whether there are private philanthropic funders who might give you a quick turnaround small outreach grant to support your time and effort in this area. But those are two people that I would strongly recommend reaching out to if you want to try to creatively find money that's not in the Digital Equity Act, but could help you do digital outreach work in your communities.
Great info, Amanda. Well, thank you, everyone. We've gone over time by quite a bit, so thank you to our speakers and the team at the California State team. This meeting is being recorded, and we're going to upload it to the civic.org website. Amanda is also kind enough to inform us that she'll let us share the PDF version of her presentation. And Scott, if we can also get yours in PDF format so we can also share, it will be uploaded. Thank you very much, everyone. I think this is the first of a series
Dr. Martinez?
of presentations.
May I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to just make a huge pitch here. I just posted the link that went live. This group is the first group in the state of California to actually get the live link to the DEEM tool. So please access this link. Give us the information that we're looking for organizational impact on communities. We really look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Martinez.
No, very valuable. So please click on the link before we end the webinar. But thank you, everyone. Again, I think this is, going to be the first of a series of such events that we have during the 2023 year and also early 2024 as we move forward with the Digital Equity Act and also the implementation in California of Broadband for All. Our communities in the Central Valley need it, so we have to make every effort to make it available to our communities. Thank you, everyone. Have an enjoyable day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.